Well, Zach, you and I both talked about this in previous episodes, but we both had bad restaurant experiences this week, and we have churned from both of the restaurants that we went to.
This is going to be a good episode because I love when we start out talking about food. We always end up there. It's just the Michael Scott quote, we'll find it on the way. But let's talk about that, Gabe, because the restaurant I went to, it's, if you can call it that, it's got to be the worst pizza chain in America. And that's going to lose our next sponsorship. But I was grocery shopping, and next to Safeway, there is a Little Caesar. So I thought, I'm just going to grab a hot pizza, take that, go home, right? You know me, just a cheese pizza. You know how I love cheese pizza. But anyway, I get the pizza, hot and ready. No, it wasn't. I get home, the pizza is cold. Like I was microwaving it, and it was at a point where I'm like, what kind of feedback do I leave to get a free pizza? Because I could have just gone back into Safeway, bought a frozen pizza, and waited the 45 minutes. But let me tell you, that was not a good customer experience. And going back to that previous episode and a little bit of what we'll talk about today, I have zero intentions on going back.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. Not quite as crummy as a place that you went to. I went to an actual nice restaurant, but it was just a terrible experience. And it was all based around the customer experience and specifically the wait staff. And it was a very weird experience. The person that was waiting on our table was just honestly actively rude, like basically the entire time, and felt like anytime you asked for something, you were asking them to basically do you a favor. Like at one point I asked the guy, I was like, hey, can I get some more water? And he was above pouring water. So instead he immediately had to go find a busboy to go get me some water. And I'm thinking, it's just some water, bro. Like, it's not that big a deal. I'm sure you could have grabbed the pitcher and done that yourself. And then just the entire experience was crazy. And we were there. It was a work event. And, this is a situation where I could have been with clients, and I could take clients back to this restaurant. The food itself was good, but there's no way I'm going to take somebody back there when I had such a bad experience.
It's funny you mentioned that because, well, one thing, I just want to go back to the pizza. How do you sell a cold pizza? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, but going back to I was going to ask you, you kind of mentioned the wait staff here, but I thought, if the food was amazing, but the staff or the experience was still poor, would you go back? But I think you gave me the answer.
I mean, the food would have to be so next level that I would be willing to deal with it. And the food was not that next level. It was good. It was solid, but it was nowhere near good enough to offset what was frankly a very weird and off-putting experience.
How good is good enough? That's what I want to know. But Gabe, I think
I have fairly high standards when it comes to food. I am not going to lie, Zach. I am pretty pretentious when it comes to my food, especially as we've talked about many times, my coffee. But yeah, it was definitely not good enough to offset all of the negativity.
I love good food. I'm not an amazing cook. I can get the job done, but I'm also the same person who's like, oh, it's Friday at midnight. I'm gonna go get a Sprite and fries from McDonald's. So
well, you also just told us about your terrible, pizza choices of going to Little Caesars. So this does not surprise me at all.
Well, it's funny because one of the best pizza restaurants, I could totally get a sponsorship from them if I tell them. It's a local place. It's called the Crowbar here in Wyoming. They've got the best food. I have never had a bad experience there. I recommend them to everyone. But they make a pizza. It's called the Sledgehammer, and it has like a fried egg kind of in the middle.
Oh yeah, I'm very down for that.
Like, Gabe, I don't know what you're doing tonight, but this place is amazing. They've got pad thai fries, which are I'm getting hungry. I will absolutely go to this place. It's one of my favorite restaurants, but that's where I should have gone. And now after that experience, like I said, you'd be a fool to think I'm going back. So
yeah, for sure.
That is the definition of churn right there, which is exactly what we want to talk about today.
Yes, it is. And it's a topic that people don't really like to talk about, which is kind of why we wanted to talk about it, because it's a little bit of a bummer, but I think it's very, very important and something that we in business, quote unquote, don't discuss enough. And again, this topic is really just about losing customers, and that is all churn is losing customers that were paying you for a service, or maybe that had a bad experience based on what Zach and I just went through. But again, people don't like talking about it because it's kind of a bummer, but it's a really important topic because it can have a massive impact on your revenue and also on your financials just in general.
I agree, Gabe. And I think the reality too, everyone's going to lose a customer at some point. I bring back the Tesla example. I didn't necessarily churn, but going back to last week's episode, I'm not a customer. Meanwhile, you are, and you're letting me know. I love that. But I think it's
I
important to think, you're going to lose customers, but
mhm.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I was driving a bunch of colleagues around this week and I was doing a lot more selling for Tesla. People were like, "Ooh, cool, nice car." I'm like, "Yes, I love it." And talking about all of the wonderful things that I love about my Tesla. So yes, I am I have now become a brand advocate.
I am very far from a brand advocate.
This is good though. We balance each other out. So it's all good. Well, I wanted to talk, Zach, just a little bit around a couple of things around churn, how it's calculated, and really talk really specifically for a moment about how to do it, like literally how to calculate churn, because I think this is an important topic that we don't discuss enough, and because people don't understand how to do it, they just choose to ignore it. So, in a recurring revenue business, which most of our customers, Zach, work in, we work primarily with broadband service providers where it's recurring revenue. So you sign up for a monthly service, and every month you're getting charged for that service. It's the gym model, it's the Netflix, it's the Amazon model, right? There's tons of these services that we all subscribe to now. So in that recurring revenue business model, if you want to calculate churn, you take the customers that you lost or the revenue that you lost, and you divide that into the count of customers that you had at the beginning of the period or the revenue that you had at the beginning of the period. I think it's important to probably calculate it both ways, because it could be that you lost a lot of customers that were paying you a little bit of money. So even though you lost a large number of customers, maybe the revenue impact isn't as big, or vice versa. Maybe you lost a handful of customers, but the revenue that you lost was massive because they were much larger customers. So you probably want to calculate it both ways. But point being is you just take that customer count that you lost, revenue count that you lost, divide it into the balance from the prior month.
It's a pretty simple calculation, and Gabe,
It is.
I love the conversation we had earlier was churn is how many subscribers did you have last month, how many subscribers do you have this month. That's kind of the metric we use, and combined with everything else. But it's easy to identify who your customers are 30 days ago versus today.
Yep. Well, and this sort of gets into another topic, which is gross versus net, and then how to actually calculate the number of customers and the specific customers that are lost. I know you're going to love this, Zach, because I'm going to talk about XLOOKUP for a minute. So we're going to get super nerdy with an Excel reference here.
Oh, let me get my popcorn then.
Yeah, let's do this. So one of the things that I think is really important is obviously to calculate that overall aggregate balance of how many customers were lost. But I also think it's really important to understand who the customers were that were lost. And so the easiest way to do this is just by doing a simple lookup between your customer base that exists now versus your customer base that existed 30 days ago or last month or even a year ago, whatever, right? You can do this over whatever time frame. But if you have a customer list as of those 2 points in time, let's just use month as an easy example. So I've got my customer list from now and I've got my customer list from last month. If I compare my customer list from now to the one that existed as of last month, anybody who's no longer here has churned, right? And vice versa. Anybody who's new, who wasn't on that list from the prior month, is a new customer. So in that way, you can really easily calculate gross additions and gross losses versus the net numbers, which may not be as impactful. And Zach, I know we want to talk net here in a minute, but before I do that, any fun like XLOOKUP questions that you just absolutely have to get off your chest?
Questions, no, but I do like to make the comment. We're talking about churn today. Who are your new customers, which customers left, as you just mentioned. You could also use this to identify people who have upgraded.
Yes,
that's
great
another
example.
great. That could be a whole separate episode. One thing I will say about XLOOKUP for anyone listening to this podcast, Gabe, I think it's only included in Office 365. So if you're using something like Google Sheets or Apple Numbers, you may have to use the legacy VLOOKUP, which we don't talk about.
Well, we don't talk about it because it's dead to me, because it's super lame. But if you do have to use VLOOKUP, yes, you can use that too. I would just, yes, if you do have the ability to upgrade to XLOOKUP with Office 365, please do so. I forgot to tell you this, Zach. So I had to use Google Sheets this week because my son's playing baseball, and we had to put this like list together of um, different things that everybody has to volunteer to do. So I was helping my wife put this together, and I had to put it together in Google Sheets so that we can just easily share it. I hate Google Sheets so much. It sucks.
Oh, I can top that easily. I downloaded a CSV on my personal laptop this week, and it opened by default in Numbers. I about like threw my laptop. Numbers is no, I was gonna say it was the second worst, but it is the worst Apple product. Like, I feel like it's just a joke at this point. Like, someone at Apple's like, how can we like absolutely ruin people's lives? And they thought Numbers. That is the worst. Second worst Apple product is AirPod Pros, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, we should save that because I have problems with my AirPod Pros too. But yes, we can put a pin in that one. But yeah, so not a fan of using Sheets. I was trying to use my keyboard shortcuts, and everything just went completely off the rails, and it was a bad experience for me. So I want to talk just really quick about gross versus net again, just to top up this conversation. So when you and I are talking to customers about churn, oftentimes they'll say, "Well, we added 50 customers this month." And that is a very dangerous way to look at your business, because you might have added 500 customers, but you lost 450. And yes, you may be up 50 customers for the month, but you lost 450 customers. And it cost you a heck of a lot more money to replace that revenue than it likely did if you just would have spent some dollars and focused on the customers that walked out the door.
And we talk about that all the time. Number one, you're masking the problem, right? Why did
Yes.
you lose 450 customers? But Gabe, we've done episode on episode where we've talked about the customer journey, the cost of acquisition, that cost of acquiring those, 450 subscribers that left is going to be huge. So hooray, you gained 50 subscribers. But again, you're masking a bigger problem here.
Yeah, absolutely. It can mask a much bigger problem. And, again, you may feel that, you get that little dopamine hit of, okay, we had 10,000 customers last month, and now we've got 10,050 customers. That's great. But if you're not taking it that step further and looking at the gross additions, the gross losses, you're really setting yourself up for failure and potentially a huge problem that, to your point, Zach, you've just masked.
Which leads us right into customer lifetime value and why this all matters. So, Gabe, reducing churn is important. We all know that. But what's the impact with CLV?
Yeah, and I want to pause there for just a sec because I want to make one comment before we move to the CLV discussion, which I don't think I've ever said because you know how much I love CLV. But I do want to make a comment around common misconceptions. One of the other things that you and I hear, Zach, all the time is that the only reason people leave is because they move. And again, in the broadband industry specifically, we don't lose people. We only lose them when they move or when they die or when they don't pay. Customers are liars. And people know that if they just say, "I'm moving," then that ends the conversation when you call to disconnect the service. So we trained them. Oh, 100%. I'm sure you do.
I used it 2 weeks ago. Customers are liars or whatever. But now it's an easy way to end that business relationship. And
yes,
I apologize for jumping over this, Gabe. I totally missed this talking point here. But again, I've done this. Gabe's done this. I'm sure everyone listening has done this. Like, oh, I'm moving. I can't, whatever your reasoning is. I just don't see it as being truthful.
It's like when you broke up with your girlfriend in, junior high, and you told her you were moving away because you didn't want to have the uncomfortable conversation. It's basically that, right? We've all done that, right, Zach? Am I sharing? Is this
that was me? But I was moving 6 blocks away.
Okay.
It reminds me of I think it was like I want to say it was Dave Chappelle. He mentioned back in 1970, you could move 5 miles away and start a whole new life. Whereas now you move 5 miles away and it changes nothing.
That's a good joke. And yes, feels very, very true. That's hilarious. But the reason I know this to be true is because I've actually worked with providers who've done the analysis to look at people who said they were moving. And then they went back and validated it with change of address forms. And a huge percentage, like 70 to 80% of the people who said they were quote unquote moving, never ended up filing a change of address form. So again, you may think, even if you are taking that further step and asking people the reason that they're leaving, that you don't have a problem. Well, in reality, you probably do. It's just that people aren't necessarily being truthful when they're calling in to disconnect because they know it's easier.
I'm realizing I'm not an honest consumer because I did this with the bank once too. So with that, as I self-reflect, Gabe, customer lifetime value.
Yes, let's come back to that topic. Okay, so the reason that I want to talk customer lifetime value as it relates to churn is reducing churn is the single most impactful thing that you can do to increase customer lifetime value. It's more impactful even than increasing your price significantly. So if you increase your ARPU or price 10% versus decreasing your churn 10%, decreasing churn 10% is going to more positively impact CLV than increasing your pricing 10%. I've done the math. I promise you it is true. It is going to be more impactful to reduce churn. So it may not be as sexy. It may not be as fun to, focus on how do I keep the customers that I do have, but it is the single most impactful thing that you can do in a recurring revenue business to positively impact CLV.
Gabe saying he's done the math and to trust him is all I need.
I've got a spreadsheet. If anybody wants it, just hit me up. I'll happily share the spreadsheet.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
I did it earlier today because I was like, I got to make sure that this math is right. So I did it just to make sure that I wasn't going to lie to our listeners, Zach.
We would never do that, as we have evidently lied to previous businesses. But
yes, yeah, we would never do what we do to businesses where we're calling to cancel. No, we would never do that. All right. Well, let's talk about what businesses can do to improve retention. And Zach, specifically, we really wanted to lean in on, I know, one of your favorite topics. Just like CLV is one of my favorite topics, I know mobile notifications is one of your favorite topics. So let's lean in and talk about this tactic.
I love mobile notifications, and I say that as a marketer, not a consumer. As a consumer, I hate notifications. But the reasoning behind that, and we'll talk through some best practices, some advice we have, and really how to leverage mobile notifications. But mobile notifications, push notifications, I've seen the term used interchangeably. It's that notification that goes right on your phone, and it's a very personal channel. I mean, you're effectively interrupting someone's day or interrupting someone's phone to share a message. I have a notification on my phone right now that I'm looking at, but it's such a great channel because think of SMS marketing, right? Like it's like sending someone a text. Of course, they have to download your app, but what does the app do? Hopefully, that builds some stickiness with your business as well. But the mobile notifications, I think it's an effective way to motivate again people to download your app and then to continue as a consumer using your app. Keep them coming back for more. So as they use your app, as you engage them with different notifications, it's going to keep them in your ecosystem.
Yep, absolutely. And when I personally think about the apps that I engage with the most, it is 100% the ones where I have notifications turned on and they're reminding me that, oh yes, I need to go back into this thing, whether it's a social app or, a news app or something. It's always the ones that that are sending notifications through to my home screen that I engage with the most, hands down, not even close.
And when you get a notification, so back to the marketing here, there's kind of two statistics I think we should highlight here. One is the direct open rate, which is when someone gets a notification. So, if Gabe texts me right now and I open that notification, you consider that again, direct open. The other one is the influenced open. And this is where I'm guilty of this. I mentioned I have a notification sitting on my phone right now. This is going to be an influenced open rate, but it's when the notification has been sitting on my phone for about 3 hours. So, Gabe, you got some statistics behind those as well.
Yeah. So we looked at some benchmarks around this just because I was curious around what is a good open rate for either of those things. And I definitely, learned a little bit around this direct open rate versus influenced open rate, but broadly across all businesses. So this is a broad statement across all businesses. Obviously, it may be a little bit different based on the type of business. So broadly, the direct open rate for push or mobile notifications is roughly 1%. So to go back to Zach's example, if notification comes through, if you click on that notification, if it drives you through to some sort of landing page or back into the app, that is a direct open rate. And again, the benchmark around that is around 1%. The influenced open rate that Zach was talking about, if the notification comes through, maybe you don't click on it right away, maybe you open the app later on within that 3 hour time frame, that's an influenced open rate. So the idea there is you didn't necessarily click directly on the notification to go to the app, to go to the site, but that notification drove you most likely to go engage with that app in a relatively short period of time. And again, that average is around 3%.
And as we talk to the marketers and anyone else listening to this episode about push notifications, I think you should also take a step back and think of push notifications as a consumer. Gabe, I mentioned, the notifications I'm most likely to click on are, of course, like communication apps, iMessage, Snapchat. If someone messages me, I'm in, right? I want to click on that. But I think, again, as a consumer, think of the non-communication apps you have on your phone. When they send you a notification, do you click on it right away? Why do you click on it right away? Why don't you click on it right away? I think the ones that are not communication apps that I would click on right away are the notifications that have some sense of urgency behind them, right? Like, open this now, like running out of time, things like that. I think when you add the urgency behind the message, you're going to be more likely to directly click that notification. Now, I think there's nothing wrong with the influenced opens, right? Like if you come
No.
back to your phone, I think we're all guilty of this, but I think you have to be very cognizant of the notifications you're sending and what your consumers expect from you.
Well, and I think having these benchmarks is helpful because I think a lot of people, if they send out push notifications and they only got a 1% direct open rate, they'd probably be bummed out thinking that the open rates should be a little bit better. So I think it's important to understand kind of what good looks like and how can you as a marketer, drive even better engagement with those direct open rates. And my feeling is, I don't know. I was going to say this, Zach, and now I'm actually not sure. What do you think is better, direct open rate or influenced open rate? I don't know that. I was going to say direct open rate because that person's immediately taking action, but I mean, both are in a relatively short period of time, so maybe they're both kind of okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking because if it's a direct open rate, that means, well, one is, probably that app or that company is doing something right to get me
Yeah.
to open said notification. Whereas with the influenced open rate, I feel like what I'm thinking of there is, so like this notification on my phone, I've seen it, I don't care about it. So eventually I'm just going to either click on it or swipe it away. So, I think there's pros and cons to both. It's Again, I think it's going to depend exactly on what your messaging is. Gabe, we work again broadband. One of the notifications I like to use is, and I don't like to use it, but it's good to have, is outage notifications, fiber cuts, things like that, things you don't want to have to communicate. But the reason I like it so much is because if I go to Facebook and say, hey, we have an outage, right? Everybody sees that. Whether they're impacted by the outage or not, everybody sees that, everybody comments on it, and it diminishes your brand value. Same with email. Now, I would never do that on an email because an outage to me is like real time, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if I segment and I can target impacted users by an outage or by a fiber cut, again, I can directly communicate with them, let them know, hey, we're aware of this. Potentially there's a landing page it links back to if it's a major outage where you can share updates. But I think, again, that's a great example too of what are you communicating? Do your subscribers, do your customers need to know? Is it good to know? But I think there's a lot of factors that can go into whether someone directly clicks your notification or if it's something, oh, hey, I've seen this on my phone. It's not critical to me as the consumer. I'll come back to it later.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So let's shift topics to the kind of real time component of this, Zach, because I know this is something you wanted to talk about as well. And it goes back to a conversation we had, I think, a couple of weeks ago around customer journey, where the customer's at in the journey and what they're looking for from an experience perspective. So can you share a little bit around what you think about around that notification from a real time perspective based on where the customer's at in that journey?
Yeah. And again, real time events. What's happening in your business? What's happening in your customers' lives that we can talk about, that we can leverage in mobile notifications? And I should say, I don't think I said this yet. I think mobile notifications are a very underutilized channel.
Agreed.
Now, again, we don't want to abuse them, but we don't want to underuse them. So you have to find that balance. But again, real time data. where your customers at in that journey. Did they recently buy something from you? Did they, add a product to their account? Did they, add a managed service, anything like that? Did they start a trial? We talked about trials a couple weeks ago. We talked about how you want to be engaged with them during that trial. If you know your customers are starting a trial, great. Let's talk to them about what they can do with that trial and leverage mobile notifications. And
Yep.
then, of course, if they're a new customer, what's your new customer journey look like? Of course, you've probably got an email or maybe even social ads that go out. What are you doing with mobile notifications for your new customers?
Well, and this sort of leads nicely into the next topic too, which is encouraging discovery around specific features. And whether it's, hey, you've signed up for a trial and you want to encourage them to use a specific feature that is really sticky. How are you thinking about where that customer's at in the journey, especially if it's at the beginning of the journey? And hey, I know that if they use these one or two features, they are likely not going to churn because these features are critical for the value of whatever product or service it is that I'm selling. So how do I push them to use those really specific features?
And this is I've been waiting. I have been waiting since I got this notification here 20 minutes ago. It's from Uber. It says, request rides 24/7. And it talks to me I can see quickly how to schedule a ride in the Uber app. So it's, trying to get me to go into the app and utilize the schedule a ride feature. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Uber's using, of course, whatever data they know about me, but they're using that to show me around their app. Did you know this was a feature? I travel, for work a lot, so I scheduled a 3 a.m. Uber when I have to get to the airport, so I'm aware of it. But it's a great way to bring people into your app. Gabe, again, working in broadband, we could think of how do we bring people into our app. I see a lot of apps that are kind of like the set and forget. I disagree with that sentiment to an extent, but how do you want people to use your app? There's an education component. Again, if they're buying things from you, how do we show them that value, help them realize the value of your app? Mobile notifications is a great way to do that.
And I'm curious on the Uber one, and I'm not sure if you actually clicked on it to see if it did this, but maybe I'll do it right now. Look at this. We're like doing real-time testing.
Look at this. We'll do it real time.
So if you click on that, does it take you, is it a deep link into the schedule?
It is a deep link.
There you go. Okay.
It takes me directly. So it brought up the plan your ride. The pickup point has already been set to my address.
Yep.
I was going to show the camera. I probably shouldn't. And it says where to. And it has like my recent. It deep linked directly to the page within the app. Now, what are we talking about? What are Gabe and I talking about? You can link. So when you send out a mobile notification, you can provide a link that takes you to a website, landing page, or even an app. But what you can also do, the deep link, is you can take users to a specific part of your app. Typically what this looks like is, and you can test it on your phone if you have it now. If you go to like Safari and do like / iMessage, it will open iMessage. And then depending on your app, depending on what you're trying to do, you can modify that URL scheme to go to that specific spot of the app like Uber just did, plan your ride.
Yep, I love that. And we talk about mobile notifications being an underutilized channel. Deep links are another really underutilized part of mobile notifications or push notifications. It's so effective so that, again, when you click on that notification, it drives you back to that very specific feature that they want you to use. And I think it's not hard to do. I mean, Zach, I know you've used Branch. I've used that as well. That's a very inexpensive, in most cases free, and pretty easy way to set up those types of deep links.
There's two things that come to mind. One is I think of it like, when you like walk into the kitchen, you're like, wait, why am I in here? Kind of like when you click on a mobile notification and, suddenly you're in the app and like, wait, what was I doing here? Or if your app is complex and you're trying to take users to a specific spot in your app to schedule a ride or do whatever you need to do, show them how to get there with one click. Don't take them to the homepage of your app and say, good luck. Take them exactly to where that feature exists. And again, act as the guide.
Yep. Yeah. And this reminds me of one of my bigger pet peeves when people run social ads that you and I have talked about before. Social ads that just drive back to a homepage. For the love of all that is holy, what are we doing? If you're running social ads, if you're paying money to get people to come to your website, why are you just driving them back to a generic homepage? It's like the kitchen example is perfect. I just walked into this room. What was I here for? uh, drive me back to a specific landing page, drive me right to the fridge, drive me right to the pantry, drive me right to wherever it is that you want me to take action. So I don't have to click 15 places before I figure out how to actually take an action based on the ad that you sent to me.
Every campaign you run should have a unique destination page. I'm a very strong believer in that. Again, Gabe, broadband. If we're talking about a gamer segment, why would I take my gamers back to the home page? I could take them to a gaming page. And with that same campaign, maybe I've segmented it by people who work from home. Again, there's two different landing pages. Personalizing that experience, I think we talk about personalization in every episode, and there's a reason for that.
Yep. Well, and look at that. We just totally walked ourselves right into the next topic without even really realizing it, Zach, which is personalizing your notifications. So yeah, and segmenting your audience. So when you do send out these notifications, it could be exclusive offers based on where people are at in the journey. Maybe they're coming up on an annual anniversary and you want to give them some sort of benefit, or they're at-risk customers, going back to our whole churn discussion. You know, if you know that there's people who are at risk of leaving you, and you know that because of the data that you can see about them and the way that they're engaging with your product or service, why would you not offer them some sort of reason to stay? Are we really just going to wait for them to walk out the door until another company comes up with a better offer and puts it in front of them? Why would I not personalize that experience based on the data that I know about my existing customers?
I've got a good example on this. And I was hesitant to say the app name, but I don't care. Bumble. I deleted my Bumble account recently, and you go through the steps, and you type in delete and everything. Not once did they do anything to try to retain me as a customer. They let me walk right out the door. There's 100 things they could have done, and I think we don't want people to abuse the system. That's one thing to keep in mind. But to have zero idea that, one, I'm not using your app, I haven't logged in X amount of weeks or days or whatever. I mean, there was no, I don't know what their journeys look like, but there was just nothing done to stop me. They had to have known, if you're the proactive marketer, that in my case, I was the at-risk customer. My engagement was low. I wasn't using the products and services, so on and so on. There should have been a journey, whether it's email, push notification. Again, it's an app, so bring you back to the app. Knowing where your customers are at in that journey, identifying them proactively, it's a great way. And the thing too, which it's one of my tips and tricks, so we'll kind of cover this one as well. Combine your push notifications with other channels as well. So don't just send out ad hoc notifications unless there's an outage. Keep that in. There's sometimes it's appropriate, but if I'm offering an upgrade to Gabe, maybe I send him an email, he opens it. Now I know that I've seen Gabe has opened the email, he hasn't upgraded. Maybe I follow up with a push notification, right? Like, understand how people engage with your other channels, and then use that data on your other channels, right? I know, I think of email marketing. A lot of people have built Facebook into the journey, right? Like, if someone opens this email, let's target them with this ad. If they don't open, let's target them with this other ad on Facebook. I've seen that integrations. Bring in your mobile notifications too. Download that list of people, go through it, build out the journey, send out that mobile notification. Depending how your mobile notifications are built into your app, you're probably not paying for them as you would with direct mail or email or social ads. So leverage that channel in addition to your existing channels.
Well, that's another great point you just brought up there, which is mobile notifications are generally free. There's usually no cost for having this conversation with your customer. And much like email is very low cost to free, these push notifications or mobile notifications can be effectively free also. And you brought up such a great point around, the multiple touch points and thinking about, based on what behavior people did, whether it was open an email, click on the email, so on and so forth, then I need to engage with them in a slightly different way. Yes, this should all be part of that overall journey. It drives me crazy when I talk to people and we're like, all right, hey, tell me about the campaign that you ran. Well, we sent an email. That's not a campaign.
That's a touch point.
Exactly. That's a touch point that's part of a campaign. And it has to be part of a cohesive, structure that's not just a single touch point. As much as we would love our customers to buy or prospects to buy based off a single touch point, very, very, very rare that actually happens. We need to see these things multiple times.
I've never seen a 100% conversion rate on a single email. I will just say that.
yeah, it's yeah, never going to happen ever, ever. And I don't even know if you get down to a single subscriber or a single customer where you're sending an email. I'm not even sure that would happen. It's not feasible.
So speaking of email, we did an email podcast episode a while back, and I mentioned A/B testing.
Hmm.
I think you could do that with I don't think. I know you can do that with mobile notifications as well. One of the big things to A/B test is what time are you sending your notifications, and this is very important. If we go back to our direct open rates and our influenced open rates,
Yes.
if you send me a notification, midday when I'm working, I'm less likely to engage with it. That's me. Now, if you send one, Gabe, remember the Super Bowl, the was it DoorDash or Uber Eats, one of the food deliveries
It
talking to
was
you about dinner
Uber
time?
Eats. Yeah, it was Uber Eats because DoorDashes are always terrible. Notifications are always terrible. But yes, the Uber Eats one was timed perfectly to. It was like Super Bowl was getting ready to start. They've done it around basketball games as well. Things like that where they are really thoughtful about when they're sending those notifications and when they want you to actually take action. To the point where they're not sending it 5 minutes before kickoff. They're sending it a couple hours before kickoff because they want to get you thinking about it and then taking action as kickoff rapidly approaches. So they're really thoughtful about when they're sending those notifications, or at least Uber Eats is. DoorDash is completely off the rails with theirs. I don't even know what the hell they're doing.
And building on that too, again, the A/B test, that is, A/B test your audience. Is there a specific audience that you're trying to target? Gabe, we use the Super Bowl. I think that's a great example. Do you have any data that shows that you've got, again, broadband? I'm thinking streamers, people streaming the big game, sports fans, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably watching the game. They're probably engaged at some level, and you can do different demographic, psychographic targeting as well, especially on Meta as
Mm-hmm.
well. So again, knowing that, A/B test your audience, A/B test your message. That one's self-explanatory. Change your content, change your headlines. But when we talk about headlines, kind of leads into another best practice I want to talk about is you've got to test these things, preview them, test them before sending. Do you have a clear message that's going to catch your user's attention? Because if it's just this long wall of text, you've maxed out your characters fields, nobody's going to engage with that. No one's going to read that. Again, this
Yep.
is a very personal, intrusive, might not be the right word, but that's what I'm going to use, intrusive channel. You are coming right onto your customers' phones and saying, hey, I've got this message for you. So you need to be very cognizant of what it is you're actually doing to catch their attention.
I kind of like that. I like the fact that it's short and that it has to be very succinct, because then you're forced to be brutal about your copy and you have to remove as many extraneous words as you possibly can. And I kind of love that about mobile notifications. It's frankly something that we should probably be more thoughtful about around every channel, but because we've got to be really thoughtful about what is this notification actually going to look like on a user screen, we're forced to do this with mobile notification that we're not forced to do as much on some other channels.
I could not agree more, which takes us right to the last point I want to make tonight. Again, don't send too often, but don't send too little. I mentioned that earlier in the podcast. A few months ago, I talked about Taco Bell sending me notifications all the time. I finally just deleted the app. I was like, I go there, once a year, and now I've got 100 notifications a week, or whatever that number was. But it was I think it was multiple a day. Yeah, you have to, again, know your audience to know how often they engage with your product and how they engage with your product. But two, again, being cognizant. Again, personalized channel. You're going to right to their phone. You don't want to overwhelm them or send them so many messages that they either turn your notifications off or delete your app. But again, you don't want to send too few that they forget about you. So finding that balance, depending on your industry, you could do a couple a week. That's kind of my personal, like, I would be okay with a brand sending me a couple notifications a week,
I
because
agree.
think of how many apps are on your phone. You don't have one app on your phone that you get notifications on. You probably have uh, tens of dozens or
Yeah,
hundreds
I
of
probably got
apps on your
50,
phone.
if not more. Yeah, I mean, and obviously I turn off notifications on a lot of the a lot of the apps that I use, but there are a lot that I do have that are helpful in many ways. And yeah, finding that balance of intrusive versus not sending enough. And the not sending enough piece, Zach, is important because you need to build trust with people so that you are sending enough to build the trust of that channel. And that is probably 2 to 3 a week, I would think, for the industry that we work in specifically. And I think if you asked most marketers working in our industry, they would probably tell you that that's too frequently. But you need to build that trust. You need to build up that engagement channel so that people expect it on a regular cadence.
Absolutely. Gabe, I love this episode. I know you love Churn. I love mobile notifications. Again,
it's weird to say that I love
using
Churn, right? But I do love the discussion around
the
Churn.
topic of Churn. I should have said that one's on me. But again, we talked a lot about mobile notifications. Use all your channels. Don't just use that, but make sure you do use that.
Absolutely. Perfect way to end it, Zach.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you for tuning into Buffering. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to give us a follow on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for even more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn and to visit our podcast blog at bit.ly/bufferingpodcast.